Welcome, Alex. Good for you to be here with us this morning. We've had a very fruitful partnership over the last 9 years between Scottish Opera and the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, where students have been mentored by highly experienced professional musicians, singers, directors and conductors, from the first audition process to the final delivery of performances in the major theatres throughout Scotland. Why has this been an enriching experience for all concerned?
I think it's a really good question. It's been really interesting that, in my view, the reason the relationship has flourished is not only because it's between the sort of two leaders of the organisation where, I guess the policy has to have its high-level anchors, but it's also the fact that the policy, and touching on the idealism, the idealism factor, as opposed to the X factor, the idealism factor, where it isn't only the idealism of the two leaders or the leaders of the national performing companies and the conservatoire that energises the transactions. It's also the fact that so many of the individual tutors have share the sense of idealism, the sense of desire to do good for young people. It also happens that people get paid and it's a job and all those sorts of useful things. But I think somewhere along the way you can write a policy, or the institution can have a policy, but if the individuals within it don't believe in it, then it'll never go anywhere. It then becomes a set of things not to do. And I think what's wonderful here is that on the whole it's a set of things to do, and I think that's something to really cherish.
Weaving together the many different strands of performing opera involves a well-crafted and dedicated team of talent. Students from the Royal Conservatoire are encouraged to take on important and independent roles in our collaborations as singers, orchestral musicians, technicians and stage management. What are the benefits from embracing these responsibilities of work-based learning for both the student and the mentor?
Speaking particularly perhaps about the musicians, I think one of the benefits is that in order to come over, for the student players to come over and be part of the orchestra for one of our collaborations, a really important waypoint that they have to go through is the audition.
Yes, that process is very intense, and it does allow the player to be a standard that is highly, the standard is enormously high for them to get in at the professional level.
And so I think that having passed that waypoint, the players that pass that, then the next great thing is they then get to rehearse with a conductor whom they've not been exposed to in the context of their time at the conservatoire. And the third thing is they get a chance to sit in the body of the kirk, as it were, the body of the orchestra during the rehearsals and performances, so that either directly through mentoring and indirectly through osmosis, they're assimilating what it is to be in a professional, highly skilled, very talented collection of players. So that has got to... I know that as individuals, all of the students are very clever and talented.
Yes.
But nevertheless, there's something about having to rein in, harness, energise yourself as part of being a group of 60 or 70 players. It's different from perhaps being in a conservatoire context.
Absolutely, that is completely different, because on a one-to-one teaching basis, or level rather, it's really detached from the real experience of being in what we call in the opera house, the engine room of the orchestra. And to sit in that is the most extraordinary, and I can say it for myself because that's what I do as a living. To sit in that is a life-enhancing experience that you cannot recreate that in a one-to-one studio with a teacher or a mentor. But then to be put in the realistic situation of playing that, it ends up that the student has this experience that they'd otherwise not get.
I think there's also, across all the elements of the collaboration, there's also interesting points. So at one level we've got really interesting high art outcomes. In other words, playing in an orchestra or singing on stage or working with very experienced technicians and things, you get a chance to really be pushed to the top of your game. But at the other end, you also get a chance to be in a context that says this rehearsal starts at 2:15. So in other words, you've got to be at your desk, backstage in your dressing room at 2:10, ready to go at 2:15, not shambling at 2:20 with a cup of coffee in your hand, thinking, "Oh, well, I suppose I'm nearly there." So it's kind of setting it. It's kind of professional nurturing at a base level as well as at an artistic level. The other interesting area that we've seen is that certainly across the in some of the more technical roles, we've also in some of the more technical roles, the collaboration has been really useful because it's given us a chance to, if you like, trial some of the young stage staff or electricians or stage management who then, when they graduate, come into our organisation and begin to quietly work their way up through the ranks. So it's a way for us to kind of trial them also, and to audition them also, and at the same time it's feeding them the voracious machine that is a touring opera company with wonderful young staff.
Having gone through the process of this unique partnership over recent years, what has been the outcome thus far for both organisations?
The outcome for both organisations of our partnership has been multi-layered. At one level, we've had the opportunity to put on opera titles that neither of us would have got to. We've also had a chance to take opera productions to not only open them in Glasgow and take them to Edinburgh, but also the year before we popped up to Inverness. Another wonderful outcome has been a chance to deepen the relationship in terms of our emerging artists program, which is particularly focused on young singers, but has recently been broadened to include repetiteurs and a director, and also indeed a costume maker. But in terms of emerging artists, I guess what struck me was that there were many young singers graduating from the conservatoire who were then left in a little bit of a vacuum in terms of going on to build their careers. And typically a young singer would go south to build their careers, or indeed across the channel. And it struck me that maybe we could do a bit more to take the postgrads and give them a kind of performance enhancement program, in inverted commas, and the Emerging Artists program, again, through the way station of an audition, the waypoint of an audition, allows us to bring together 3 or 4 young singers, typically either based in Scotland or Scottish, that we could then put into the company for a year, and kind of win-win for all of us, in the sense it was win-win for us that we had young singers able to do covers, understudies, small-scale touring, and maybe some small principal roles in the main productions. But also it's a chance for the young singers to work more closely and be more immersed in an opera company, and therefore kind of broaden their performance capabilities before they go off into what is a very brutal professional world, especially if you're a young soprano.
So it's nurturing that talent in the green shoot stages of the professional career, and also it's the mentoring situation where our more experienced staff, and just for argument's sake, the music side of the occasion, where we've got head of music Derek Clark and the repetiteurs who would work very closely with these young emerging artists to give them that opportunity in rehearsal and the final aspect of performance.
That's right, and it was also an opportunity for the young singers to learn again by osmosis, being surrounded by other, really wonderful professional singers, but also on occasion to be in a chorus. Because you'll be aware that many singers sometimes are a bit uncomfortable at the notion of being in a chorus. They think they're destined exclusively for a soloist life, and actually it's well and good to be a soloist, but as a soloist you've still got to have a fabulous relationship with the chorus, and there's nothing that can quite beat knowing how that is. You can't become a fabulous soloist, in my view, without some experience of the dynamics of being in a chorus. It's also interesting that I'm a great believer in the artisan route, the thing that goes, you can't beat just working really hard. And there's something about having a year-long performance program with us where you do small-scale touring and understudying and chorus work and small principal work. In other words, where you are really busting yourselves for a year. You can't beat that, just the doing of it all. Whereas if you're just freelancing, trying to build a career, your work's a lot more episodic. The other thing I think that I love particularly about young singers doing the small-scale touring is that you can't beat the pressure of every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Saturday, having to get out there no matter where you are in Scotland to deliver a performance, whether you've been able to have a shower on a Tuesday, whether the nylon sheets have been blue, whether the bus has broken down, whether you've been seasick on the ferry. And I know that, again, they're very sort of prosaic kind of pressures, but there's something about surviving all of that and coming through it with your professionalism in place to deliver a show in some small community somewhere in Scotland where those folk who pay their taxes like everyone else in Scotland are entitled to the most wonderful performance that we can give them.
Alex, with the ever-changing landscape of the arts and being mindful of the green shoot talents being produced here at the Royal Conservatoire, how do you see their future in this competitive marketplace?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Lawrence, and I might answer it slightly obliquely in the sense that I think we've got one of the joys of the Conservatoire and the place it occupies in the kind of cultural ecology of Scotland is that it has an amazing capacity to produce contributors to the arts, performing arts ecology across all the kind of sectors and spheres. So you've got a fantastic film school, you've got dance, you've got all the theatre arts and crafts, the performance arts and crafts, as well as the music school, which is both instrumentalists and singers. And I think across that, the Conservatoire is absolutely the right, in inverted commas, factory to be producing young people who can then go out into the arts ecology of Scotland and respond to the opportunities that are there, because it's quite likely that, for example, you could come out as a highly experienced stage manager and then quite quickly find yourself in one of the many emerging film projects that are on the go. You've only got to look across the actors ecology of the UK to see how many fabulous alumni from this place have gone on to, sit across. You can see how many of the acting alumni are now participating in wonderful films and plays all around the UK and the rest of the world. I think there's an interesting thing with technicians coming out of here, some of which come in, as I've said earlier. So there's an interesting thing where technicians coming out of here, for example, some of them go directly into Scottish Opera, others go to work for the National Theatre of Scotland and their wonderful worldwide touring map. Others go out to be part of the film ecology. Others go out to be part of, for example, the fringe ecology. I think this place is a wonderful kind of hotbed of creativity, and even if the skills you learn here aren't directly applicable, you still come out with a huge understanding of the performing arts. So I think in a way, one wouldn't necessarily think of the Conservatoire as a finishing school, but you think of it absolutely as this kind of literally a hothouse of talent and ability, and people come in here and go, oh, I could do this, I could do that, what does that feel like? And come out the other end ready to really make a go of it, particularly here in Scotland. And I think the unique thing, in inverted commas, about the Conservatoire is that by sitting physically so close to most of the other national performing companies, but also because the integration of tutors, both full-time and part-time, from the various national performing companies into the teaching ecology of this place, I think, every student comes out of here with the most wonderful phone book, which can only set them up in terms of finding further work. Whereas the further south you go, the more each individual student has to create their own matrix of connectivity and opportunity. Whereas here you're coming out, knowing players from our orchestra, knowing players from the other orchestra, knowing coming out here knowing casting directors of the National Theatre and of the Citizens Theatre, and I think it's a really amazing kind of hotbed of opportunity.
There's also great loyalty from our alumni who in fact come back, not only in the music school but the drama school and in fact all the other disciplines, to show their appreciation of the art form that they've been so immersed in during their time here as students, but have come back to share their experience to the undergraduate and postgraduate students. And so it's this continuation of organic growth of this art form.
I think it's a really lovely way of putting it, actually. That sense of continuum, and that you kind of you come out as a student and you come out as a postgrad or whatever, and you go out into the world, and it as part of your duty to come back into this place and say, here's what I've learned, how can I help the next generation go further forward? And I know that sounds a tad idealistic, but it is particularly true in this place, the high levels of idealism about and for young people entering the performing arts.